Hello everybody, welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton.
Chris Paynes.
Michael Dawson.
We're in Dawson's basement enjoying a 3-man, 2-beer stout fest. One a itty bitty stout, one a fairly eccentric peacock of a stout. Very alcoholic, very flamboyant. It's a weird description.
Big boy stout.
Yeah, Imperial Irish coffee stout.
This one isn't that small.
Okay.
Like it's in a big glass. It's got heart. No.
We're about to walk you through the brewing of Michael Dawson's fairly small Beamishish,
But in a big glass.
right, stout, and Chris Payne's Imperial Irish Coffee Stout, both of which include the use of MCI Stout Pale Malt. They call it Stout Pale Malt, right? Or just MCI Pale Malt?
MCI Stout malt.
Okay, which is ironic-ish because it's actually pale.
Very pale.
Solid base malt, high extract. You're going to learn a thing or two from these two guys about that base malt. So let's get into it, man. It was a dark and dreary evening.
Stout for Chop and Chop. Sorry, that's your line.
Stout.
It's a little late. This was supposed to happen before St. Patrick's Day in order to kind of urge the viewer to brew a stout. But is there ever a bad time for a stout, really?
Now you can brew a stout for Easter or Memorial Day.
As always, real life gets in the way.
St. Patrick's Day gets in the way.
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day gets in the way. So here we are, late March. We're still enjoying some awesome beer. Let's talk our way through this first beer. Mike, what is it called and what is it?
It's called Beamishish. It's like Beamish, so it's ish, Beamish-ish. It's not a clone of Beamish, but it's inspired by my memory of drinking that beer in Ireland. Beamish is from Cork City in the south of Ireland. Fun fact, cool tie-in, kid running across the floorboards upstairs.
That's awesome.
Fun fact, cool tie-in, MCI, the malting company of Ireland, grew out of Beamish and Crawford's floor malting facility. Became an independent company that started producing malt, but they got their start as the malt house attached to the brewery in Cork.
So it's a traditional base malt of sorts, even though it's new to the home brewer? Is that the way it shakes out?
I hadn't used it much. I don't know if you had used it much before this either, Chris. It just kind of became available in the homebrew market just a couple years ago, year and a half ago. Like you mentioned, it's a pale malt. Like it's only 1.6 or 1.8 Lovabond. Kept pretty pale, so it has a lot of enzymatic power left intact for converting unmalted adjuncts in a traditional stout grist, like flake barley or what have you. Beamish, I was kind of going off a description that was written by Michael Jackson in one of his older books. Beamish doesn't use unmalted adjuncts, or at least until they were bought by Heineken, they didn't. The grist was mostly pale malt. So for this recipe, I had the MCI Stout malt. They used chocolate malt in place of unmalted roasted barley for the color, which was a pretty distinct thing about Beamish. And they also use wheat malt instead of flaked barley as the kind of bodybuilding, protein-rich adjunct grain.
So it kind of takes everything you know about Guinness and flips it.
Or dry Irish stout.
Everything you know about dry Irish stout and kind of plays with the parameters.
Jackson also wrote that they used a blend of English and European hops, Challenger, East Kent Golding, and Hallertau Hersbrucker. And the BU-GU ratio was pretty close to 1.1 to 1. So it was a dark, bitter beer.
Paynes actually kind of compared it to like a porter meets a Pils?
Yeah, kind of like a Schwartz beer, but not even as roasty. Like it's got a really smooth, light, not crackery like a Pilsner malt, but definitely lighter. Obviously it's a lower Lovabond than even most pale or Pilsner malts, so it's got a nice easy drinking, low body, low protein, high extract potential. So yeah, it works out really well. It's not, competing with the roast or the wheat or any other flavors. So.
And so one of the interesting things, I think it's going to be a sellable point for this base malt for homebrewers specifically, who are generally fairly cost efficient people,
That's a nice way of putting it. I'm a cheap ass.
So beyond being traditional and interesting, this base malt it's got a high extract yield, right? So high that what you aimed for, a 3.5% or even less percent beer, became a 4% beast unexpectedly.
Yeah, so it's not that tiny chip. Back off.
Yeah, talk about the difference from that and maybe some other like 2 rows or 6 rows.
The kernels are really plump. I mean, they're just enormous. And even side by side with like an English pale malt like Amaris Otter, which are pretty huge to begin with, the MCI Stout malt kernels are really big. I'd calculated it at the same efficiency as typical UK Amaris Otter, like 37, 38 ppg, something like that. I overshot the gravity on this batch by a couple points with that malt, and I've done it since with a couple other batches where I've used it as the base malt, so it's not a fluke. It does have a really nice extract yield.
Yeah, the plump kernels obviously means there's more starch inside, kind of like a Mare's Otter, British type malts versus domestic. So yeah, if you see the larger kernels, that means there's more extract available, and having the lower Lovibond means there's more enzymes to convert that. So it's definitely a win-win, and it's boosted gravities. With even a poor efficiency, you're gonna get what you need out of it.
Yeah, I've heard of more and more pro brewers using this as their house base malt, I think because they're just the same reason you use high alpha acid hops to a degree, is you don't need as much to get a good bitterness in the form of hops or malt extract yield. And I'm sure that would follow through to homebrewers. Anything that pro brewers realize is a smart decision, homebrewers aren't very far behind.
Yeah, new brewers too that are trying to get their sparge and lautering figured out. It's a nice way to start. Use a malt with lots of potential sugars, and that way if you miss it by 5-10%, you still have a usable 1050 or whatever beer. Or you could do a double batch with a smaller amount of grain. So you could do 2 4.5, 2 5% beers with a smaller portion of grain, which is obviously more beer for less work. So.
And Dawson here is also doing something else unique. We're pushing this through a beer gas mix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is making it very luscious.
Yeah, it. I think the wheat is most apparent in the body. You can't really taste the contribution, but it's got this really kind of pillowy softness. It's large part due to the beer gas and the. I didn't actually carbonate this. I was in a hurry to get it on tap, so I just put the flat beer in the keg, dropped a stone in, and started pushing it at 35 psi with the nitrogen CO2 blend through a stout faucet. So
it's force beer gassed.
Mm-hmm, it's force gassed.
Force gas.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds gross. So where does this compare? Beamish is no longer available in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So from your beer nerd memory, your beer nerd mental journal, where does this place alongside that?
I think it's in the same vein. The use of chocolate malt, like Chris pointed out a bit ago, is a really different character than a stout that uses roast barley, which to me breaks a lot more acidic and coffee-like instead of like out-and-out chocolatey and softer. Jackson mentions this, and it occurs in enough other pieces of literature writing about Beamish. I don't remember it myself, but I take it on faith because enough other people mention it, that there is or was a hop flavor in Beamish. They use some of that Challenger EKG Hersbrucker blend late in the kettle, and so I think that does make it a little portery, a little more kind of old school and vestigially English versus the straight-ahead dry Irish stouts as typified by Guinness and Murphy's. So I used a really small proportion of my blend at 15 minutes in the kettle, and it's subtle, but I think it's in there, especially if you get some foam in your mustache and leave it for a few minutes and then like come find it a little bit later, like you can really pick out that kind of black curranty, fruity Hersbrucker and Challenger note.
What is the yeast?
1335 British 2, fermented at about 68 degrees. The non-canonical thing that I did, because this was from memory, I remember there being this like dark fruit caramel malt note to Beamish, and even though Jackson didn't mention caramel malt being a component of the grist, I used a like 7.5% extra dark crystal malt. It was a Patagonia C190, so very dark, very raisiny, almost Special B-like. Mm-hmm. And that might be a little bit of what you're picking up on, I think, Chris. The just a little bit of a fruit, almost yeast estery kind of quality. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with it. It drank pretty good.
It drank pretty
as
good.
The man said.
Mine's gone.
Okay. We should probably do something about that.
Because you guys talk a lot when we do these kinds of things, and I'm like, nerd stuff and made beer.
I know it's a stout party, and I don't know if this would be like, number one, it would be evening up the beers to dude ratio if I brought this out, but I have another beer on tap that is like 95% MCI stout malt.
Okay.
So if we wanted to taste that, we could, but it's not. But it's yellow. It's not.
It's yellow?
It's not a stout. I don't know if that's.
Well, let's go to Chris's stout.
Okay.
I'm empty, and we definitely want to talk about it because it involves brewing with coffee. It involves the imperialization of this malt. So let's we'll come right back. Jump cut. So we're back here now with the heightening of the Stout Fest. What we have is Chris Paynes Imperial Irish Cream Coffee Stout. Tell us what makes one of those.
Well, this was kind of a personal challenge. Seemed like something fun to do, to mix stuff together and hopefully have it work. Obviously the MCI Stout malt coming from Ireland. Kind of thought of Irish cream, coffee, and not just a normal milk stout or a normal dry stout, something more interesting and challenging for me. So we've got a whole bunch of grains in here that I tried to blend with coffee in the mash, coffee at the flame out portion of the boil, pride of ringwood yeast that's a little bit more challenging, fruitier flavors, on top of kind of whiskey aging it on American oak for a couple weeks. No biggie.
How about a half dozen new things, man?
Yeah, just it's my first time brewing, so I thought I'd do the kitchen sink approach to it.
Well, the first thing I want to ask is, how did the stout malt act as opposed to what you would expect for a base malt?
I exceeded efficiency, which didn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. Starting gravity was 1085 to begin with, and shot past that just a wee bit, so whatever. So we've got about 56% was the stout malt. Lots of other malts, I'm sure. I don't know if you want to put those in Chop and Brew.
Yeah, check out the recipe at the link below, both of these guys. What I really wanted to ask about, we've thought about doing a whole episode, and I'm sure we will eventually, on brewing with coffee. Chris Paynes here kind of took that ball and went and did a lot of research about brewing with coffee. When it came time to do this one, you didn't just brew with coffee in the mash or in the boil or in the secondary. You kind of hit it a double dose, right?
For coffee, I kind of think of it as a combo of malt, as far as having a roasty malt. I think of it as a hop where it has fruit flavors, it has herbal flavors, and it has a different character no matter what variety you use or where you get it from.
And it's got acidity.
Yep, definitely drops the pH, kind of like a roasted malt. So I essentially used it in the mash, kind of like a roasted malt. So if I were doing a stout where I had 5%, roasted barley, I'd do 5% coffee. Grind it up coarsely, kind of like a normal grind, I guess. Throw it in for the whole mash, and Yeah, you kind of get more of the flavor from the coffee, like the fruity, kind of the subdued flavors versus the roasted flavors. I found if you want that fresh coffee kick, like that, you know, the morning coffee aroma that you think of when you think of coffee,
Yeah.
you've got to add that at the flame out or later on where you don't boil it off. So I essentially did a 15-minute flame out with a quarter pound of coffee. I ground it up 90 seconds before it was time to use it. Dumped it in, kind of made a nice jello layer.
Wow.
Didn't absorb into the water, so stir it. Otherwise, you have a cap of coffee mud.
Like when you brew it in a French press.
Yep. It's kind of like a mud-like cap, so you gotta stir it in to get it mixed in. Otherwise, you just have coffee floating on the top. So the purpose was to get a blend of the coffee flavor, not just have a one-dimensional flavor. I ended up using 2 different local coffee that had like graham cracker flavors. One had fruity flavors and one had peppery flavors, and kind of tried to blend things that I thought would work well with the coffee milk stout profile. The later Whirlpool edition kind of added mouthfeel to it, and the mash added flavor.
Yeah.
Kind of like a malt.
And then it ferments, and then where does this Irish whiskey come in? Tell me about the whiskey.
Well, just had some more local ingredients, local whiskey, and had, I think, 2 ounces of American oak. Just used some cubes. While this was fermenting in the carboy, had a separate dish. Poured the whiskey on top of the oak, let it kind of soak up for, 2 or 3 weeks. Decanted off the liquid. Tasted a little bit of it. Not that good. Really bitter, woody alcohol bite to it, so it was a good thing I dumped out that because there's plenty of flavor still left in just the cubes alone.
Yeah.
After fermentation, kegged it up, left it at room temp with priming sugar and the oak, and then put it on the gas, and a few weeks later, here we are.
Here it be. So what
Here we are.
what are you getting out of this here, Mike?
The coffee flavor is really beautiful. I mentioned that before, like the earthiness of the Sumatra that you used really comes through. Like it reads as morning coffee. It reads as freshly brewed, like you said. Grinding it right before you use it and not boiling it, adding it as it begins in or the cool side, I think makes a huge difference. The oak and the whiskey are really harmonious, which I appreciate. Like, it's so easy to go overboard with those 2 ingredients, but it's discretion is the better part of valor, and it's really beautiful here too. Lots
of vanilla, which more than I've ever had before.
Yeah, that's kind of the predominant oak note I get, and then there's some tannin structure in the mouthfeel. But it's all really well integrated with the coffee and the whiskey notes and the roast malt. There's lactose in this too, right? Which is what makes it Irish cream stout.
Forgot about that extra ingredient.
How did that affect the fermentation or the final gravity?
Despite what it tastes like, it kind of mouthfeel wise, it tastes like a 10-16-ish beer maybe, because it tastes a little thinner. It's actually 10-30.
Dang.
So, yeah.
What's giving it that impression? A combination of maybe the bite from the coffee and the tannins from the oak? It's coming off a little red winey in the way it kind of coats and dries.
And the whiskey bite to it as well. But I can only imagine without that milk sugar, it might be too dry, too oaky.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I was asking you beforehand, I mean, we've rushed this for the purpose of putting these 2 beers together as like little bipolar opposites, but you'd rather sit on this for a minute, right?
Yep. I think I found with like wood aged beers, like most other people know, the wood kind of blends flavors together. Like even if they're polar opposite flavors, they might blend a little bit better with the vanilla that kind of unites them. So usually I would give this a few months. Wouldn't even touch it till then. So
Off the oak, too, we should point out. You're not saying time on oak. You're saying even after the beer's removed from the oak, it may benefit from time
correct.
of kind of just settling and mellowing into its own.
Yep. Yeah, when you have roasted malts that have little particles that stay in suspension, those add kind of a weird bitterness if they don't fall out. And they're not easy to see if you just look at a beer, but they're definitely present. So
the beauty is, everybody couldn't be here to taste this, but you guys are willing to share these recipes, right?
absolutely.
You bet.
Check that out, chopandbrew.com/recipes. Look for Beamishish and the Imperial Irish Cream Coffee Stout. I suggest both of them. One's going to be ready a lot quicker. One could stand to sit around the cellar for a while, man. Maybe brew it now for next winter. I'm going to have this around the hearth, the fireplace.
Or you could brew it for Memorial Day and have a total rager.
Breakfast beer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Toga. Yeah, and also check out the MCI Stout malt. It's a really cool thing. We're going to try it in a couple of other beers. Like he said, he's got something yellow. We might put that in a lanyard. We might just put it in our stomachs, but we're not going to put it in this episode.
I offered, but it wasn't allowed.
Yeah, so you're going to see more of that malt. Tell us your experiences with it. Go out and get it, sub it, see how it works. Let us know what differences it makes. And don't forget, Chop and Brew t-shirts, Chop and Brew stickers, both available at chopandbrew.com. Click
Online superstore.
Online superstore. Click shop. You can also get the Chop and Brew ringtones, compliments of Abstract Artemis. That is not at the Chop and Brew website, but I will hyperlink it in the video description for wherever you're seeing this. They're really cool. I have one on my phone. Everyone at my workplace likes it because it rings as soon as I leave my desk. But yeah, the theme song and the credit theme song. So, man, until whatever. Until later. Chop for chop.
Brew for brew. Until whatever.
Until whenever, man. Until whenever.
Blam! Hey, girl.
All right, let's 3, 2, 1. Stout. Let it all out.
Jackson wrote about Beamish, and this is corroborated by other writers. I don't remember it at the time I was drinking it, but it occurs in the literature enough that I take it on faith that there was a little bit of hop flavor in Beamish as well. They'd used their blend.
It's time for Charlie's Pill, everybody.
It
Sucks, dude.
Consummate professionalism.
Damn it.
Hey, good night. This is my friend Chris. You know
Hello.
Chip.
Hey, Dev.
How's it going?
What's going on? See you later. Thanks for... That's kind of creepy.
That was bedtime.
Oh, I spill it all over my writing. I can't read it now.
I stole these from Reddit.
I wrote all over my spills. This is a bigger beer, but it's in a smaller glass. I just want to point that out.
No. I'm rambling. Irish Imperial Coffee Stout Cream.
You know how I can tell you've been rambling? Is because Paynes and my beers are lower.
We're in Dawson's basement having a 3-man, 2-beer stout fest.
Woo!
Yeah. Cheers.